encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. If you want to be a serious Bible student, a successful servant, and a powerful preacher, this is the podcast for you. This episode of Preachers in Training is brought to you by the new homeschool bundles from Sane Publications. Check out the new bundles designed specifically for students to learn the Bible from home in a homeschool setting or for family devotionals. 2 bundles for each age group, preschool through high school. Learn more at sanepublications.com. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. My name is Robert Hatfield, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things preaching and ministry. Welcome to Season 12, Episode 4, where today we're talking about congregational connections. Here to help us discuss this subject, we'll make that a little clearer in just a moment, is Adam Faughn. It would not be a season without Adam Faughn, joining us from Paducah, Kentucky, where he labors for the Central Church of Christ. You can also find him at faughnfamily.com. Welcome back, brother. Glad you're here.
Good to be with you again. Hope things are going well over in South Carolina.
We're still here, which every week feels like more of an accomplishment. I'm not really sure. So we're going to talk a little bit about the coronavirus stuff, although there's aspects of what we're going to discuss today that I think are beneficial in general. I mean, we want to talk about staying connected with the membership at large of the congregation that we serve. I think that's important to do, but we are living in unusual times when, that might be more difficult than ever. Visits are limited because of social distancing and other restrictions, hospital restrictions and that sort of thing. And so there's an aspect of connection that we're missing from that perspective. And then on the other side of that too, some folks still are unable to get out. They don't feel it's safe to get out. They're at elevated risk. Perhaps they're having to quarantine because they've been around someone who's had the virus, or maybe they themselves have had it. And it can just be really difficult to keep up with everybody. At least that's been my experience. Adam, I assume it's the same for you, right?
Pretty much. When this really became real to me was what feels like 18 years ago in March.
Right.
We have one of our members in a hospital that's literally, when I leave our building, I can see it. I mean, it's across the parking lot, but it was cool and windy, really windy that day. So I actually drove, it's like a quarter of a mile away and went to see this lady. And I noticed that there were a lot fewer people just walking the halls and things. Of course, I knew, stuff was happening. We all knew that. Mm-hmm. But I went to visit her for a few minutes, and she was, thanking me for coming and said, "Man, they're acting strange around here today." And she's one of those ladies that mentally is just as sharp as all get out. So I knew when she said that something was going on. And I got back in my car to visiting her, and seriously, the drive from the parking lot to here is about a minute and a half. And I noticed in that drive, my phone had a notification that I had an email. So when I got to the parking lot, I just opened it up, and it was an email from the hospital saying they had just closed their doors to visitors.
Oh, wow.
So I was like literally at most probably one of the last 5 or 10 people to leave the hospital until just a handful of weeks ago.
Whoa.
That's when it became real.
Are you able now to return to the visits and things?
Some.
Okay.
The hospitals are allowing basically one family member, and they will allow a minister, but only for very, very specific things at this point in time. And so far, thankfully, I have not, quote unquote, had to visit anyone in those circumstances at this point. But they are allowing just very, very tiny amounts at this point in time.
Okay. That's hard, isn't it? I mean, there's an aspect of that can, I don't know, in one sense, it's less getting up and going. I mean, you're still thinking about those people. I'm just talking about from a minister's perspective. Mm-hmm. You're still thinking about those people. You want to try and make some connection with them. Sometimes, when they're in the hospital, they may not have their phone handy, or they may not really feel like talking on it. But you hate to send them a letter and them get it, 2 or 3 days after the fact, whatever they're dealing with. But I guess we're just all trying to kind of figure out the best way to let people know that we care and are thinking about them.
Yeah, and I don't know what the situation is for every preacher who's listening to this or watching this, but our folks here at Central have been fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
the ones who have been in the hospital, which thankfully have, and we have had none with coronavirus that we know of. Some
Oh,
have been
great.
asymptomatic, we know, but that have been in the hospital for some reason, or have just been sick for some other reason, they have not complained at all that the preacher hasn't come to see them because they don't want the preacher to catch something and not be able to see anybody for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And they've been very gracious with just getting a quick phone call or a text message or an email or whatever. And yeah, they've just been great with it. I think most Christians who are acting like Christians are, are
Right.
fine with the fact that their preacher's job right now is different.
Hmm. And a lot of people who are taking this seriously, or those people who may be ill, kind of don't want you coming around anyway, coming to the house, just because some people look at me like, well, where have you been? Who you been
Exactly.
hanging around with? And
Exactly.
yeah, we've been fortunate as well with the church here. We haven't had any outbreaks that or cases of the coronavirus that have affected the congregation as a whole, for which we're really grateful. One thing that we're noticing as we think about sort of connections is that our attendance, of course, is low.
Hmm.
We're about we're meeting right now for Sunday morning worship only, and then Wednesday evening classes. And I think pretty soon we may be expanding more of that. The elders are definitely interested in doing more, and we see the value of getting together, especially in a year like this one where we're all dealing with challenges, and you add politics on top of that. Everything. Sorry, I shouldn't go there, but I did. Yeah, but these are challenge. This is a challenging time, and it's more important. It's extremely important now. I was going to say more than ever. I don't know if that's true, to make sure that as preachers or church leaders in general, elders, deacons, and really one Christian to another, that we're just staying connected with each other during these kinds of times, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the way we're meeting, we are meeting now for worship only, but we're doing both services on Sunday,
Mm,
and we're meeting midweek with no separate Bible classes. We actually began Bible classes back, I want to say late July, no, late June, early July, and had Bible classes for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then not here again, but in our area, and we sit right on the Ohio River, so we kind of have to look at Western Kentucky and Southern Illinois. We have members from both states. The number of cases in both this entire area began to go up, and so our elders thought, you know what, let's not have kids, trying to social distance in their classes and then bouncing down the hallways and going to sit with my grandma in the auditorium.
yeah.
We don't want to be the reason. And so we dropped Bible classes, but we are still meeting for, I guess you'd say, all three services, the two on Sunday and one on Wednesday,
Yeah.
with an eye towards hopefully in the next handful of weeks, beginning at least one, if not both Bible classes back very carefully.
Hmm.
But our attendance has been most time on Sunday morning. Normally we'd be well up over 200, 220, 230, somewhere that range. And we are more in the 135 to 150 range. So
Yeah.
a little over half. Um, and you can just see that the people who are in person love being there, but you can see in their eyes, they know it's still just not right. There's just still this, we're a church family, but it's not like it was, and that's
Hmm.
sad in some ways. But again, people are understanding with it. But as you said, it just makes it more important for us to do what we can to foster communication. Something I've preached about, not necessarily all full sermons, but I've tried to weave it through a handful of sermons as we've come back together. Is that even though a lot of us are back together and some aren't, no matter how it works, unity is a fragile thing.
Mm.
And Central is a beautiful place as far as family atmosphere and unity and all of that. But just because we had it doesn't mean we have it.
Mm.
And so we have to keep fostering, connections and communication, or we're going to have years, I believe, years of work ahead of us to rebuild what we once had if we don't work through this to keep it.
Hmm. That's a good point, and it occurs to me just watching social media and those sorts of things, which I try to do as little as possible these days. Uh,
Especially with a year of politics.
well, and that's what I'm saying. We are forgetting what we have in common, and accentuating what the ways in which we're different in a lot of
Hmm.
time, in a lot of ways. At least I'm observing some of that, and I'm observing some of that even locally. And everybody's got their opinions about this or that, and the politicalization of COVID or whatever else. And I'm thinking we've got to foster that connectivity and sense of togetherness and of unity, just so we don't forget. And I've also been a little concerned about, what if one day we realize, you know what, that was silly to debate over stuff like that, but we don't really have anybody to say that to because we've burned all our bridges one with another. I'm not trying to just be negative and not focus on what's positive, and I'm certainly not trying to speak ill of the brothers and sisters with whom I get to worship and serve and all of that. It's not that at all. It's just maybe in the back of my mind, there's been a little voice of anxiety back in there that says we need to be proactive about this so that these worst case scenarios don't come true.
Yeah. Not long ago, I preached a sermon here at Central on Romans 14, the passage about, the English Standard Version has opinions. King James
Yeah.
has doubtful disputations, which is a wonderful biblical phrase. But our associate minister had preached just a couple of weeks ago on a similar topic. And we hadn't discussed that at all. And I told the congregation it wasn't planned. We weren't, like saying, hey, we got major problems here. But one of the things I mentioned was social media. And maybe it's just me reading way too much into it. But I think so much has been, however you want to call it, taken away from us in 2020, or just upset, unnerved, whatever, that I think for a lot of us, a lot of Christians, that kind of what they're holding on to are opinions.
Mm.
And instead of sharing the gospel, we're sharing how I feel about stuff. And we're missing a grand opportunity to really put a united front out there instead of just, I feel about this or my group feels about that or whatever. And
Mhm.
it's, there's a wonderful way that we could show a united front if we just actually do it, instead of just kind of fracturing and splintering into this little group and that little group about stuff that, I mean, it matters but doesn't matter all that much in eternity.
Yeah, that's right. Well, uh, tell me what you guys have done. What you maybe personally or the eldership there, to whatever degree you want to share any of this or can,
Hmm.
have done to foster this kind of connectivity, and maybe particularly among that a little less than half that has not yet returned. I mean, we're noticing this even though we're meeting for Wednesday evening Bible classes and for Sunday morning worship. Uh, the people who don't get to come, who are unable to come, they kind of feel left out. And watching a stream, they said, isn't the same.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes we'll have different opportunities and things, and we'll say, uh, you'll notice this on your way in or whatever. And those people are like, no, we don't see any of that.
Yeah.
We don't see the people's faces. We don't, it's just not a good substitute. What are you doing to help those people in particular to feel like they're not forgotten?
Well, let me go back to the first part of the question about just kind of communication part of it.
Yeah.
When in Kentucky, like most places, I know you all did as well. Early on, we had to stop having in-person services,
Yeah.
uh, and we did that for, I believe it was 9 weeks, where we did not have any in-person services whatsoever.
Well, that's
And
brutal.
it was absolutely crazy. And for the first handful of those weeks, all we streamed was a sermon, and then we got a group together to come to the building to, song leader and all that. But seeing that coming, and it happened here fairly rapidly, frankly. I think our governor did a good job early on with some of that stuff, but that seemed to happen quite rapidly. That recommendation was made. Our elders decided to get the. We have three elders. And at that time, I believe we had 7 deacons and we have 2 ministers. Um, we simply took the church directory, divided every family up except obviously four, the elders, deacons, and preachers, and had divided it up. Had those leaders in a rotating fashion call every member of the congregation every week,
Hmm.
and it was amazing how many of those calls either lasted a long time because people wanted to talk, or people just expressed gratitude that, because they were scared or they were upset, and then on top of that, I was able to make just a little, I'll just admit it, kind of form text and copy and paste it each week, and I texted everyone who had a cell phone.
Wow.
Got a text from me every week for about the first, I believe it was 7 or 8 weeks of all of that until we
Mhm.
were able to meet back in person. And it was just a quick little thought about unity or about overcoming fear. It's probably a 35-word devotional, I guess, best way to put it.
That's
And
impressive.
yeah, and then and any and of course always an offer to if anything you need, let us know. And I got texts back from members, and I say this to my shame, but who I've almost never talked to.
Hmm.
It's not because I don't love them, but just maybe they don't come all that often because of health reasons or whatever. Who just loved that they were getting something.
Hmm.
Um, then as we started meeting back, we took a few weeks off from the phone calls, but then the elders again requested that the leaders do that, but cut it back to once a month because we were live streaming a full service.
Hmm.
And so they were able to at least see, the inside of the auditorium instead of just, someone's face right up by the screen. But we have really tried uh, publicly through the announcements and to weave through sermons. We have really tried to not just say, like you mentioned, so as you came in today, we've
Yeah.
tried to just say, as we worship today, or whether you're here or on live stream, and just try to make sure
Yeah.
they realize that while they're not sitting in those seats, we know they're there. And we're doing our best to go back through our members do a great job. A lot of them are of just commenting, so and so is watching,
Hmm.
and go back through and see. And are there people who aren't in either place? Are the ones who are not in person, okay, and we don't see that they've commented on Facebook or they forgot, forgot to text, say, hey, yeah, we watched today. And I know our elders and me especially are trying to at least send those people a text message every so often, not to badger them in any way, shape, or form, but just to let them know that, hey, we know that you're staying away right now. And we know why. We know either some of them have health issues, some are just fearful, some have a job where they're worried about bringing it back and forth, and we know that.
Hmm.
Uh, but we want you to know you're still part of the family, and we always just try to say something like we're looking forward to the day when this is over, no matter when that is.
Yeah.
And as I said early on, you know, when you're working with faithful Christians, that's enough.
Hmm.
That they don't need a sermon, about church attendance. They just need someone to say, "We know that we know what's going on, and we care about you." And Christian people are fine with that.
Yeah. You know what's difficult, and I may be overly sensitive to it, is to communicate that without feeling like the other person gets the impression that you're trying to tell them they need to be returning.
Hmm.
Like,
I get it.
yeah, just to say, hey, we miss you. We understand that you want to be here and that you can't be here. But it's hard to communicate that sometimes.
Yeah, and one of the ones I sent early on when we stopped kind of the weekly calls and my weekly texts and everything. I waited, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, and again just formed a little short form text message, and just sent. I actually sent on the 4th of July, which is a Saturday,
Mm,
and so part of that was just hope you're having a good holiday and able to do something today, and hope you're able to watch our live stream tomorrow. We miss you, but we know you're doing what's right.
yeah.
And it just and maybe there's a better way of saying that, but it wasn't like, okay, I know you're shooting fireworks off today. Why can't you be in the building tomorrow morning?
Right.
It didn't come across that way at all. I hope what it came across as is I hope you're able to step outside and get some fresh air today because I know you can't tomorrow.
Hmm.
And just just expressing that concern. And I think people are seeing so much of this in the media and of course living it, but I think if we would just be consistent and like what you said, it doesn't come across as if we're badgering them to come back. It
Yeah.
comes across as we understand, because I didn't just get one text message or one phone call or one email, kind of hinting, no, he's actually asking or saying something, or the elders are doing that, you know every 3 or 4 weeks. And so I know they care and they understand, and that it's almost the residual effect. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Um, it, it, these are hard times, and my temptation has been to do two things that I've tried to stop doing. Number one, what I want to do is get up every week and just sympathize with everybody and let people know I'm feeling what you're feeling, and then I learned people are kind of tired of hearing me talk about this. Nobody
Hmm.
told me that. I just sort of figured it out.
Hmm.
And I said, I made a commitment with myself. I'm not going to talk about masks or coronavirus or anything related to it unless I have to, unless I'm asked to make an announcement or something, anymore from now on. I'm just going to get up there and stick to the script, so to speak,
Yeah.
and preach my sermon and try and be positive, because I thought the only way that we can help us through this is for somebody to get out in front of it and lead us there, to
Right.
keep trying to help us go forward. But then what that did was, and I had to correct this a little bit too, the temptation was then to sort of take it into a normal gear, and we're not living in normal times.
Hmm.
This isn't normal. And so even though right now, Sunday morning, when I'm preaching at the scriptural time of 10:30,
Right.
and there are people in the pews again, and we're doing every other pew, and families sit together
Yep.
6 feet from other families, and blah blah blah. And so sometimes that even though we're about half capacity, normal numbers, spreading everybody out like that makes the auditorium look pretty full. And
Hmm.
I'll think, wow, this is great. And then it hits me, I have not even acknowledged the online audience whatsoever. And so I totally left them out in my sort of haste to try and get back to a normal feeling. So those are two things I've kind of had to correct, because I don't want to keep discouraging people by bringing up what they're hearing in the news every day anyway. Maybe the worship service ought to be a reprieve from that. But then number two, I know it should be. And then number two, I just don't want to leave out and alienate a group of people that at least ought to be half of the people that wish that they could be with us, but for whatever reason they're unable to do so.
Yeah.
It's been interesting trying to monitor some of that.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was trying to think, and this is not like I've handled this perfectly, or we have, Leo and I have, our associate minister and I, but some people may know, on top of the coronavirus stuff, we were also finishing up a building project.
Oh
We
yeah,
we we did not meet in our auditorium for 16 months, um, and so that was actually finishing up when all the coronavirus stuff began.
perfect.
Um, and so we met in our annex. We started meeting back. We met for two services. We split services there, and he and I preached just a little short 3-part series. We just called it like "What's Next" or "What Now" or something like that, just about dealing with difficult times and all of that. And so we kind of brought in the obviously the coronavirus stuff then, as part of that series of how we're going to go forward from that. And then when we came back to one service, it actually was the first service in our auditorium, which helped us out with the social distancing stuff.
Oh,
And so I didn't feel like I could even begin that sermon without saying something, about how people had handled this, how,
yeah,
how great they had been, how great the elders have been, and all of that. But then I have tried every Sunday since to walk up to the pulpit and start preaching
yeah,
and not feel like I have to say any, some announcement about, well, we sure wish we had more people here. We're sure glad you're here. But no,
hmm
in John chapter 1, that's a good place to start a sermon. And I might during the sermon throw in, when I preached on opinions, I gave, a handful of examples here or there. And one of them was, should we wear masks or not? But that
hmm
was all I said about it. It doesn't have to be, let me give you my commentary on it. No, people want to hear the word of God. That's what they're hungry for.
yeah,
So I don't feel like I have to get up there and take the first 90 seconds or 2 minutes to calm people's nerves or make them feel like, you know, they're okay for being at home. No, they didn't come to hear me talk about coronavirus. They came or tuned in to hear me talk about Jesus. So
yeah,
why not just go up and start preaching about Jesus? And that's what
hmm
I'm not perfect at it, but that's what I've tried to do is except for those kind of special cases of first time back and first time in the auditorium, I've just walked up and been, opening illustration or opening verse or here's where we're studying that and go.
yeah.
And I don't know if anybody's even noticed that or even cared, but to me, in our situation, that seemed like the right approach because then it wasn't what we were dwelling on coronavirus and now let's say the Bible. No, let's say the
Right.
Bible. And if it happens to fit that, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Part of a challenge that we have is to try and cut down on everybody handling stuff and that kind of thing. We took out all the songbooks from the pews, and they're all piled up in a in a room not far from where I'm sitting at this moment. And we also removed attendance cards.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking about that with reference to congregational connections, because occasionally the membership in general would fill out an attendance card with maybe a prayer request or something like that. And so now we've lost that line of communication. And then guests as well. And we've had quite a few guests. Some of them found us with the YouTube streaming that we've kind of had to double down on. We weren't doing as much of that previously, and now we are. And then others are members of the church, and they're joining us because the congregation, maybe where they meet, is nearby, but it hasn't started back yet in terms of meeting. And so they've decided we're on the right on the state line, kind of like you guys, South Carolina and North Carolina. And the Charlotte area has had quite a few cases, particularly in those hospitals there. And so a lot of the congregations there, following some of the guidelines from the government on that side of the state line, have been a little more conservative in terms of opening back up and taking a slower approach to some of that. And so some of their folks are coming to visit with us. Well, somebody might say, "Hey, did you get to meet so and so?" No, I saw them. What did they look like? Oh, they look like this, and we're trying to figure this out. And so we came up with this digital way of through some church software that we use. If they send a text message to a number, then they get a form they can fill out, which is basically a virtual attendance card. But we've had to be creative with ways to try and address some of those needs.
I
I'm
like that idea.
curious, maybe what you guys have done, or what you're sort of
We
shoestring
may,
and bubble gum to get it done right now.
you may have just given us an idea, because that is one thing we have not done well. I mean, I'll
Hmm.
just say it. We don't have attendance cards out either, and that's that's the reason is we're trying to not handle as much stuff, and we really have not come up with a specific follow up plan. We have had a few guests, but we've been, I won't say lucky is the right word, but I guess it kind of is. We've either known them, like you said, another
Yeah.
congregation in the area, or it's someone just traveling through.
Hmm.
We haven't had very many at all that just found us and wandered off the street, from the community or whatever. That has happened, but just
Yeah.
a couple of times. But we need a better way to follow up, especially as restrictions do start to ease just a hair. I think I really truly believe we'll have more guests, and so we need a better plan. And so I may I may listen to this episode again, or after
Wow.
we stop, after you unpush the red record button, we
I don't. That may be the first time anybody's made a reference to unpushing the button. We talk about pushing it quite often, but
yeah,
well, I did not mean to put you on the spot, nor did I mean to
no,
reflect poorly on the central congregation, because I know you guys are doing really great, and we have not thought through everything either. That was just one thing I happened to think of,
yeah,
and we did that in part. You mentioned, and I meant to include this. We did that in part because we wanted to have a record of the people who were attending virtually.
hmm,
Some of them know to type in the chat of YouTube, but some people don't. We're streaming only to YouTube right now rather than YouTube and Facebook, or just Facebook. We just decided to go to YouTube. It seemed easier for people who didn't have a Facebook account,
yeah.
so we
Yeah, we're
chose
we're
YouTube.
doing both, but yeah,
Yeah,
we're seeing more on Facebook, but we have some folks who are really really thankful that we have the YouTube, because
yeah,
either just not on Facebook, or some aren't on Facebook and don't like Facebook.
right. Yeah,
That's fine. So YouTube's free, so we'll do both.
yeah, exactly. Um, well, so how about are there any plans that you guys have? Have you thought any about ways to try and foster connections? Like I know some congregations have done like outdoor events where they can really spread out in a huge way. We've talked about trying to do some of that here. It's just so oppressively hot in South Carolina right now, and we're like, we're gonna have to wait till the fall before we can really
Yeah.
reasonably do anything like that. Do you guys have anything like that on the horizon, or have you talked through some of that?
We have not made specific plans, but yes, there has been a lot of talk, especially among the elders, about, as things begin to ease a little bit, what are some things
Yeah.
we can do to to reconnect? And we've mentioned some outdoor ideas. Um, we've mentioned, if there becomes a vaccine or whatever, because I said we reopened our building. some kind of almost like grand opening, even though it might be a year after we after we open,
Uh,
to reach out to the community. We've talked about restarting youth events outdoors,
mm-hmm.
and so yeah, we're trying to talk about some things. The situation we're in right now here, and I'm maybe similar there, I don't know, is we feel like we're kind of in a holding pattern. The reason we stopped Bible school was rising case numbers in the area, and then we thought we don't want to restart our Bible classes like the week of when public schools are going to start.
Oh yeah.
And now, of course, now in Kentucky they're recommending not starting until sometime in September. So we may have to rethink that and restart Bible classes or something along those lines. But we're trying to do what's right by God first and foremost, but we're also trying to be good citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to play the game of let's kind of use the public school as not necessarily our decider, but sort of like our barometer.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to send here in Paducah, we have a high school literally across the street that has 700 and something students, I believe, 800, something like that,
Hmm.
and then another high school in the county that has like 2,000 students, 1,800 students, something like that. And so it's a really good, you know, you would guess that when those schools start, cases are going to come back up. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see any way that just doesn't happen, but we don't want to restart stuff basically at the exact same time and not know where it came from. Was it us or was it them? You know,
Oh yeah.
and so we're kind of in a holding pattern of either let's only do outdoor stuff if we do extra stuff here in the next few weeks. We're in the same situation you are. It is crazy hot.
Mm-hmm.
As we're recording this yesterday, the index was 106. So
Woo.
nobody's going to show up to anything. Let's go barbecue. Let's go grill some hamburgers and make it 200 degrees outside.
Exactly.
Uh, but we are looking at some outdoor things, and maybe demographically instead of just congregation wide, as I said, youth activities and things. But we have not specifically planned them because we're still trying to kind of be in that holding pattern of let's see what's decided about schools
Yeah.
and about other things before we start just assuming we can redo our calendar. We are planning, if we are able to restart Bible classes in the next handful of weeks, specifically by or before the first Sunday of September. We're actually planning on starting some Lights to Leaders practices because those are even smaller groups.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to spread them out all over the building, some of the class activities and things if we do them. But we thought that's actually a way to start something for our kids that's a little bit different, but we can actually do that really safely because it might only be
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 kids in one particular event. And so we're hoping to be able to do that as something. And I don't know if congregations have thought about that. If you have 5 young men, for example, doing guard, well, you
Mm-hmm.
can get them together in pretty much any state in the union right now, and do that outdoors or in a huge classroom or something. And so that might be an idea for a congregation to try, or just think of a whole lot smaller groups, and that may be one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. We on Wednesday evenings we've consolidated our classes down to 3 classes, and
Hmm.
then our teenagers are actually meeting off site right now for a summer youth series, and they'll like meet in somebody's backyard, so it's not so bad. They're able to spread out and all that. So we've got some folks in our library, which is a little larger of a room, and so those children can spread out. They're all 6 feet apart. And then we've
Hmm.
got some other children down in one of our larger classrooms, and they're all spread apart. Then we've got another class of children in our fellowship hall, and they're all spread apart. And so we're not using any of our small classrooms right now, but we're using all of our larger area. Of course, the adults are in the auditorium, and that's allowing us to accomplish what we're accomplishing so far. But we're finding a lot of families are sort of reserved about returning,
Hmm.
especially families with younger children. And, we understand that. Some of them are doing that because they're exposed a lot to grandparents. Maybe grandparents are there with the kids while mom and dad are working from home, or working in some kind of abbreviated, amended way. And so they want to make sure that the exposure is limited and those sorts of things. And so we understand all of that. As we've been talking today, I've been thinking a lot about the importance of just being able to adapt and rolling with things, which has been like the theme of 2020. it just keeps rolling and rolling. But this has been hard for me. I'm kind of a routine, set in my
Me too.
ways kind of person. I like to find something that works well, especially with ministry. I like to find a means of connecting with people that works and just use it. And I guess it ask me in 5 years looking back, the Lord willing, and maybe I'll say it was good for me to have been through this. I'm almost
Yeah.
confident that will be the case, but for now it's unpleasant. And I think a lot of preachers are feeling that. At
Oh,
least I'm
absolutely.
assuming they are.
The first couple of weeks we were shut down from having anything. I mean, I was live streaming a sermon and that was it. Did a couple other things online. There were a couple of days I went home in the afternoon because I have been able to work from my office every day. That's been a blessing. But there were a couple of times I came home and Leah, my wife, was just like, "What is wrong with you?" And finally, I
Huh.
just told her, I said, "I don't know what I'm doing."
Oh,
And I wasn't trying to be funny.
yeah.
I did not know, how to do my job. And now, looking back on, I'm with you. I think maybe I've gained a couple, a skill here or there, or some discipline, or patience, or something.
Yeah.
Something good has come out of it. But it was difficult because you finish writing your sermon and you want to get up from your chair and go visit somebody, go visit a shut-in or a widow or something, and nope, that ain't happening.
Yeah.
But then you also want to continue to teach people, and I'm not anywhere near as tech savvy as you or somebody else. So okay, how can I do that? How can I adjust on the fly? And for somebody like me, and it sounds like you, who are kind of routine, and I know how to do, and
Mm-hmm.
it was depressing is not the right word, but it was way beyond frustrating.
Mm.
And I think it took a lot of, and still does, but especially then, I think it took a lot of, what's the right word? Almost acting when I would be on screen,
Yeah.
releasing a sermon or a class or something that still projected, hey, things are going to be okay. And when the camera's off, it's like, I'm not sure they are. I mean, I know God's still in control, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure things are going to be the same anytime soon. And, but people need to see that, not that we're lying, not that we're being hypocritical, but that we still do have joy, even if we're as frustrated as all get out.
Yeah.
And we still have, the biblical piece, even if we are, as confused as all get out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, communicating that right now, I think is as important as anything else, is that we're going to be okay. Um, but it's okay to be frustrated. I think people need to hear that it's okay to be frustrated, but we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the phrase I've been using is I'm trying to lean in to God's promises rather than lean away from them. And the
Hmm.
temptation may be at times to lean away. I don't. That's not what I want to do. But just to what's going on? I'm kind of feeling out of control, and I don't like that feeling. But to lean into that, I think helps a whole lot. And you're right. It helps us at least to say what we know is true and right,
Hmm.
even when we don't often feel that that stability is actually present with us in the moment.
Yeah, I'll tell this story real quick, and maybe it's more personal, and I want to share, but I will anyway. But when we were having no services except just an online sermon,
Mm.
we had done that. I think we did. I think it was 9 weeks we did that total. This was probably about the fifth or sixth week, something like that. And I was doing those from my house.
Mm.
We would get up in the morning and we would do this little quick Bible class with the kids, and then we would sing. We sent the congregation a list of suggested songs, and we would sing those,
Mm.
and then my family would pause for a moment while I went over and made sure my computer was set up and everything, and then I would preach the sermon live. And after we had done that, like I said, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, I preached all the passion I could and all the truth I could and the smile on my face and everything else.
Mm.
And I hit the stop recording button and just started crying.
Mm.
And Leah said, "What is wrong?" I said, "This is getting harder every week."
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of broke down. She could tell, okay, this little attitude he's had is not just he's not sleeping at night or something. It's like this is really affecting, because I mean I know this is preachers in training, but we're talking about ministry. We love people and we want to serve people, and when you can't be around them and you feel like you're not being as effective as you could be because you change everything, that ain't easy.
Mm-mm.
And it plays with your mind after a while. And as I said, it's okay to be frustrated. but just don't let the frustration make you burn out or make you stop doing what you can. Don't be so frustrated you don't send that text message or make that phone call,
Yeah,
because somebody on the other end is probably more frustrated than you are, because at least you're at your job. They may be sitting in their living room every day, all day long.
right.
So you can at least, send a text or a phone call or something, every so often. So yeah, and I think we need that interaction ourselves, because it helps. It's the right thing to do, but also helps us realize, you know what, I'm still working with the best people in the world, just a little bit differently right now.
Yeah. And yeah, I love what you said, and maybe I can adapt it just a little bit and not make it better or any worse. Might probably make it worse, but just to say, uh, we can't feel so much in a box that we just give up and don't do anything.
Yeah,
I mean, any effort, anything you try. I mean, it may not be as good as in your estimation what you used to be able to do, but picking up the phone call, picking up the phone and making a phone call, I always feel better these days after I hang up. I'm glad. First of all, I'm sort of proud of myself that I did it. Sometimes it's not really what I wanted to do, you know, but I'm kind of proud that I did it. And then just I get the impression that I put a smile on the other person's face, but more than that, I know that they put a smile on my face, and that connection helped me tremendously. And that
yeah,
gets me through, the rest of my Thursday or whatever day it
yeah.
is. And it's helpful. Do
And
something.
people just appreciate the effort.
Yeah.
The very first Sunday we had to shut down, I recorded a sermon or live streamed a sermon, from our house, and the only way I knew how to do it, with what we had, was live streaming through my phone, in my living room. But I tried to set up a little PowerPoint, like people can see your screen, if they're watching it.
Yeah.
I tried to set something like that up on our television. I figured out a way to do that. It was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. You couldn't even see it. I mean, it was a giant glare on it, and all you could see was like the little outside. You could kind of tell when the color changed on the screen. It was horrible. I don't know how many people, either in the Facebook, chat, or
Mm.
later on, thanked me for trying. And
Mm.
I thought, if these aren't the best people in the world, I don't know who are. Because I mean, it was you honestly, you couldn't even read what was on the screen, but they knew that, there was effort there. I don't say it to brag. I
Yeah.
brag on our people.
Yeah.
They're looking for the effort. And if
Hmm.
if we're reaching out, where it's, learning a new, way to reach out to people technologically, like you said, just making a phone call, they're going to be grateful, because right now they're thankful for anything,
Hmm.
that shows some effort and care for them.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, wow, I have thoroughly benefited and appreciated this episode. We Adam and I went into this one without an outline. I don't know if anybody can tell that. I
I
know
don't.
we naturally speak in outline form, but
I don't say good morning without an outline.
but anyway, what I appreciate about you, brother, is you're always willing to share your own heart with us, and that means a lot. The vulnerability that you've exhibited today, and every other time you've been on the podcast, but it just seems especially so today, really means a lot. And I'm thankful you did, because everything you said, I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling that too. It's not just
That's
me.
right. Wait, there's another preacher out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I
That's,
get it.
and I have a feeling everybody else who's listening to this can feel the same way. In just a minute, we'll have a word to wrap up. If there's any final charge you want to give, or any final thing you want to say along those lines, we've said a lot, but maybe there's one more thing. I always like to give an opportunity to wrap things up. Let me just remind those of you who are listening or watching that Preachers in Training is brought to you by the Light Network, a greater network of podcasts designed to encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. Check out the other podcasts that are available. 10 or 11 brand new episodes released every single week, one of which is this one, the one to which you're listening now. Check out God Magnified, the Book Club, Bountiful, any of the other. That's just what releases on Mondays, much less Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I want you to check those out. And if you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button, especially to this podcast. You're listening this far in, 45 minutes. You might as well go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And incidentally, a brand new episode of Preachers in Training releases every Thursday from thelightnetwork.tv or wherever you get your podcasts. It's been mentioned a few times as well. We're also recording these on video. We started a little bit of that last season. We're doing it perhaps a little more in a dedicated form this season. And so if you prefer to watch instead of to listen, then you're welcome to do that on our YouTube channel as well. And of course, you can subscribe to that also and be notified every time we release a brand new video. And if you subscribe to YouTube, you may even receive the content a day or so early. It all just depends on whenever I hit the publish button on YouTube. So sometimes you can get ahead by doing it that way. We're really appreciative that you listen. We appreciate your feedback and your listener requests. And every episode that we do this season is a listener request. And so we're grateful for that. Thank you for helping to make my job easier in the hosting chair. But also, I look forward to the discussions. And sometimes we have to interpret a little bit, maybe what the listener meant when he gave us this sentence or whatever. But it helps a lot. And I think it makes for a really well-rounded podcast. And so we appreciate your involvement in that. Adam Faughn from FaughNFamily.com in the Central Congregation in Paducah, Kentucky. We've been talking today about congregational connections, keeping in touch with each other during these strange times. What do we need to say as we wrap up today?
The only thing I want to just add is, and this could be true of any episode that you have, but I think it's poignant to this one. You don't have to be married to be a preacher, but if you are, or if you're a dad, you're reaching out to everybody else in the congregation at this time. Don't forget to reach out to your wife and your kids. When I sent those weekly text messages to the congregation, I sent them to my wife and my kids. I got the same one. But don't just reach out to them that way. They're struggling too, and they're watching you be frustrated. They still need a husband. They still need a dad. So don't get so, as to use your phrase, Robert, don't get so boxed in, with everything else that if you're married, if you're a dad, and don't forget, especially right now to be, the preacher, but also the minister to your wife and your kids.
I appreciate that. Wow. That was an area I hadn't thought to go in this discussion, but I'm really glad you included it in there. Thank you, brother, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Enjoy it too.
And as I said, we appreciate all of you for being a part of our discussion today. Next week on Preachers in Training, David Shannon joins us, president of Freed-Hardeman University, to talk about top 3 qualities that every leader must possess. So you want to join us for that episode, season 12, episode 5 of Preachers in Training, and I'm looking forward to releasing that discussion with you. Find out more in our show notes to the link to Adam's website, FaughNFamily.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Preachers in Training. Until next time, I'm Robert Hatfield. Let's preach the word.